Welcome to Parenting Teens with Dr. Cam, a podcast about navigating adolescence without losing our minds. Each week, I guide you around the teenage landmines with practical tips, simple solutions, and words of encouragement. I'm your host, Dr. Cam. Let's get on with the show. Welcome, parents. If you want to prepare your teen to be successful in their careers or whatever they decide to do in the future, this episode is for you. Today, I'm joined by Michael Trezza, the founder and CEO of Giant Leaps Learning, an online after-school enrichment program. Michael and his team help kids master the skills they'll need to become great leaders, not just in the future, but right now. Michael is going to talk to us about the foundational routines and behaviors he believes are essential for setting our teens up to thrive. Welcome, Michael. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, Michael, start by giving us a little backstory. What got you focused and then started on helping kids become great leaders?
Well, the short and simple answer is becoming a father when it comes down to it. I've been a technology entrepreneur for the last 22 years or so. When I have a 6-year-old daughter, when she was born, I just started to really think about the world that I was bringing her into and how we were going to educate her, how my wife and I were going to educate her to be a successful little human being in this kind of what I think of as a really dynamic world. That was really the impetus for building this company. It was really about her and her peers and future generations.
I love that. It is amazing how becoming a parent changes your priorities and focus, right?
It changes everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it's cliche to say, but yeah, it really does.
True. That's why it's cliche. So tell us a little bit about what are some of the key skills that you focused in on that we want to help them develop?
Yeah, I mean, the three things that we really focus on are self-awareness, global awareness, and critical thinking skills. So those are sort of big words, and they don't mean a whole lot out of context. But what that means is we really want kids. We believe that if kids and young people understand who they are, who their natural strengths are, what their natural strengths are, what their natural interests are, that creates a foundation of confidence and purpose and a kind of a relevance and a context around which they can like build a life on. And from there, everything is possible. And the next thing is global awareness. And what that means to us is not really about like global issues. We're not talking about like politics or, Me Too or things like that necessarily. What I mean is where the world could be going, like where the world is going. What's the world going to look like in 10 or 20 years? How is that going to impact the workforce, how we communicate, how we live, and who do you see yourself being in that world? That's sort of what we mean by, well, that's exactly what we mean by global awareness. And then critical thinking skills. If you don't have creative problem solving skills, creative thinking skills, you are just not going to be relevant in the workforce and the world of the future. So, or even today for that matter. So those are the three things that we really focus on. And critical thinking skills for us is the ability to find information. We don't really need better test takers in the world. We need better problem solvers. We need people who understand how to find information, how to use that information to make better decisions, right? So that's what that is for us.
Yeah.
So those are the three things. And
I mean, those three things are so huge. I think how we help them do that and what that means. I want to kind of dig in a little bit into each one of them because they are all just
they're big,
extraordinarily important.
Sure.
So the first one is about themselves and finding their strengths, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how do we do that in a world where, and I will say it's really hard as a parent when you either struggle to see what your child's strengths are sometimes, some people do, right? Or the strengths that you're finding you don't feel are the strengths they need to succeed, right? So I see that too, where they're like, these are their strengths, but I'd really like them to get better at this. So how do we help kids, and how do we allow our kids to lean into their strengths?
I saw something and I read something yesterday that's really relevant to this, and it was, and I'm not going to be able to quote it verbatim, but it's something around parents would be better served, would well served to see the fullness, to recognize the fullness of their kids' expression. And how that resonated with me was the strengths that we see in our kids or we want them to develop. Man, I wish my kid was better at math, or better at these things that we think are going to translate into success and careers and stability and things like that in the future. Maybe valid for sure, but it's really easy to overlook the things that your kids are naturally drawn to and engage with. And sometimes it's really important to recognize that that may be their superpower. Something around that may be their superpower, and that could be that could be the beginning of an incredible trajectory for them for the rest of their lives. So to answer that, I would say like the best things we could do are really to look for where they're strong, and figure out ways to encourage that, to grow that into something that can be valuable to the world, or valuable to their sphere of influence.
Yeah. And one thing I've seen with that too, I'm curious your take on this, is
Mhm.
sometimes those strengths we perceive as flaws or weaknesses,
Yeah, yeah,
and it's really the direction that they're taking it. So
absolutely.
is that, you agree with that? I'd love to hear
100%.
your take on
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I mean, if I'm understanding you correct, I mean, how I kind of think about that is, let's say your kid is interested in gaming, and it's really easy to complain, like, all my kid wants to do is play games and not do work. Well, consider for a minute that there are careers in marketing, in finance, in pretty much every possible silo in the gaming world, right? So if you squash their interest in something that they're naturally engaged with, you're closing off a pathway to them that could be something very, very relevant and enticing to them. So if we think of ways to like mix and match interests, those are really valuable pathways to careers, as far as I see, or to forget careers, to like lifelong success.
How,
Does
so
that?
no,
Yeah.
that's spot on. And I mean, I love hearing other people's perspectives, especially when they support my own. You know,
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah, I know the
right.
feeling.
Um, so before we go into the next two, which I think, can you just really quickly, you just used the word success, and that is
Mhm.
a loaded word.
Yeah, it doesn't mean
How are
anything.
you
Uh,
defining success?
yeah, I define success as fulfillment, and uh, fulfillment for sure, and the ability to well, I don't have the word. It's really early in the morning for me. So, not sustenance. To take care of yourself, to be self-sufficient, right?
Yes.
So, and to do that in a way that you feel fulfilled in, right? That you're not hating life, or waking up with the Monday blues every day, and those sort of things that are just really like common tropes in the world, in the workforce.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be that case. I think that success means fulfillment and the ability to take care of yourself and your family.
I love that. So that kind of takes a little bit to the third one that you had said, which was the
Mhm.
problem solving,
Mhm.
because um, what I'm seeing a lot of is kind of the opposite of what you just said, not just in work, but in school,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
there is literally the Monday, oh God, here I go again, where we're teaching
Mhm.
our kids that life is about doing stuff we hate.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's about repeating back what we've learned, the
yeah.
way, kind of. So talk to me about, or us about, problem solving and how that kind of helps them develop and how we help them build that skill.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the very tip of that iceberg is what in life isn't a problem to be solved. We'd like to think of them as just challenges and opportunities for learning, but what project or what anything worth doing, or just anything, isn't a problem to solve, and maybe there's a better or more creative way to solve it. So it's relevant to everything that you do in life, absolutely everything. So it's critical. It's completely critical and important. And the way I think of it around how schools deal with things are, they they don't make it relevant. They don't make the things that students are asked to learn relevant to them. And kids these days are far too smart and far too aware of the world to not see that relevant, or to not see that that disconnect,
Yeah.
right? And like, why am I learning this? Or why am I being asked to learn this? And when teachers and administrators can't give them real answers that they're buying, then there's a massive disconnect with learning. For us, it's the other way around. We really need to really figured out how to engage a kid and get them curious about things, and then from that basis, you can teach them anything. But and creative problem solving is a big component, and the way we approach it is, I guess, I don't know what the word is for it. It's Socratic inquiry. It's giving them ways to ask better questions, to not answer their questions with answers, but to answer their questions with more questions sometimes, and forcing them to stretch and reach and think. And I could talk about that topic for a really long time, so maybe give me some guide rails and
No, I know, and I think one of the things that's hard is that we see, one of the things I see that we kind of fall into is solving problems for our kids.
Yeah, sure.
In trying to make their lives easier, or trying to make sure that, we're worried they're not going to make the right choices. So what is some guidance for parents who are like, I want my kids to learn critical thinking, but their choices now and their ability to think critically is terrible right now, and I don't trust them to make good choices?
Can you give me an example?
Just when it comes to homework, I mean, that's a really blatant and easy one, is parents will ride their kids about their homework all the time, right? Mm-hmm. They're on them all the time about it. And then, they say, I don't trust my kids to do their homework if I don't do it. Or, not playing video games, like you're saying. If I'm not in there making a decision on what they do with their time, they're going to choose poorly what they do with their time. So I need to go in there and decide for them.
Yeah. So are you saying, like, are you asking like methods to sort of solve for that? I suppose.
Well, yeah, or kind of even just a mindset on how do we address when we're worried about the choices they're making, but we also need to let them make choices to develop those critical thinking.
Okay, well, that's a good question, and I think the answer on some level is, well, if we want them to act like adults, we need to treat them a little bit more like adults. And that means things come with consequences in adult, and that doesn't necessarily have to have a negative connotation. But as adults and as people in the world, whatever you do has a correlated action, has an output on the other end. If you don't do your homework, you're going to get X grades, and that means whatever the next goal you have may not work. So I think parents could do a better job of helping their kids understand really the real life consequences. And I think that may be a big miss in parenting, from what I see at least, is there are really few consequences for kids without parents stepping in to solve the problem for them. And I think that and I don't mean consequences as punishment. I just mean the things that happen as a result of you doing or not doing an action. And parents more often than not want to jump in and fix things for their kids, and that's not giving them the tools to do it for themselves. I don't know if that's too hypothetical of an answer or not.
No, I think that's and I think that's I like that, because I think it is really hard for us to do, but hearing the why of why we need to do that and where that leads.
And I'll give you an example of something that I see a lot. Is we work with a lot of college counselors. Or just what our program does, it really aligns well with that kind of track. What I see or what I hear a lot is students who are supposed to get their college essays done aren't getting it done, and the parents are jumping in and writing it for them, or doing a lot of like the edits and things like that for them. Well, what is that really helping the student, or what is that teaching the kid right then and there in that moment? I don't know that I would say like let the kid just not get it done, but by you doing it as a parent, that sends every wrong message possible that things are going to be solved for them, and that there are no consequences for their inaction. Does that bring it to like down to the real world a
That's
little
a
bit?
really good one. Yeah, that's a really good one because we'll see it with homework too.
Yeah, yeah.
So what are some tips? Like what, I guess I'm curious too, what are some skills that you tend to see are lacking these days that we want to, as parents, kind of focus more on and making sure we're really targeting or
Yeah.
making sure we're doing things that are strengthening those?
Yeah, I mean, really creative problem solving, and I mean, and all these things that we work with are really lacking, unfortunately. You know, kids by and large these days um, are really conditioned to have to being told what to do next,
Mm,
and that's not how the that's not how things really work very well in the real world very often. It's going to be up to you to determine what your next actions are, and to organize those properly. What I think some of the skills that are lacking and would be really useful right now is creative problem solving. But the way I think of it is sort of like project management on some level. Like, how do you address a multi-step, like a big project, and break it down into multiple steps and execute on those steps?
mhm.
That's something that is, it's really not dealt with in schools very much, and that's something that forms the basis of almost every job on some level, and many tasks in life.
Yeah. It also reduces anxiety because now you have a plan
Yeah,
rather, and I've
yeah,
seen that
yeah,
with a lot of the students I work with, is they're so anxious because there's so much stuff.
yeah.
And when we kind of help them, show them and teach them how to come up with their plan,
Right.
it reduces that. So let's
Yeah.
go into the last one because I
Hmm.
think this, the global awareness, is that what it was that you
Yeah,
called it?
that's what we
Yeah.
call it. Yeah,
So that one, I feel like the way you were describing it is really what gives our kids the passion and the motivation. So tell us
absolutely.
a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that I mean that's the most interesting and exciting part of what we do. We get to talk about hypotheticals, where the world is going, where it could be going, and that's what really engages the students that we work
Yeah.
with. When you ask a kid like, what are you interested in? You know, are you interested in gaming? Are you interested in sports? What do you think that's going to look like in 20 years? Like, you tell me what kid doesn't lean into that conversation. You know, you're talking about what they want to talk about.
Yeah.
And once you do that, once you kind of build rapport in that little area right there, then you can teach them all sorts of incredible things and really valuable things.
Yeah.
Um, but but yeah, that's what our program is really focused on, is exploring the potentials of the world and how those are going to impact the way we live, learn, and work. And it gives them an awareness into career options and the yeah, let's just call it career options in the future, that in a way that school doesn't.
Yeah.
What I mentioned before was, if you're interested in gaming, well, you could be in finance in gaming, or marketing in gaming, or copywriting, or design, or any other any other field in gaming. And the one of the big problems that I see with traditional schools is that they do a good job of showing kids where the world has been, but a pretty terrible job of maybe introducing them to where it could be going.
Mm,
And there's 100 jobs that are going to be here 10 years from now that aren't even imagined today.
I'm telling
um
you, this wasn't imagined when I was in school.
Absolutely not. No, no, I mean, absolutely not. No. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that long ago. I mean, I grew up in the 90s, for 80s, 90s, and computers were around. You know, I had an Apple II GS, and we had the internet when I was in elementary school. But nobody was suggesting that I go into programming or technology or something like that. And by the time I graduated college, you couldn't find enough programmers, right? And the world was just in a different was just a different place, right? And we're seeing those sort of. I think it's naive to think that those sort of jumps aren't going to continue to happen. You know,
Yeah.
it's hard to spot them now in the moment, but that's going to keep happening. The iPhone was what, 15 years ago? You
Was it
imagine?
really?
Yeah, in 2007. You remember? Can you even picture a world before a smartphone? Like how people
I don't know
communicated and
how we lived.
yeah, I know it's silly, right? But when you think about it, like everything that you get done, I mean, you FaceTime family across the country,
Yeah.
you text, you find all your information online. I mean, what can't you do with it? And what the world looked like 15 years ago before then was very different, whether we like sit and recognize that or not. And the question that I'm always kind of making kids kind of get their arms around is, what's coming next that is going to have that significant of an impact on the world? And it's something that you're going to see. It's worthwhile to track that, you know?
Yeah. So the three things that you're saying to kind of jibe with that is that it's not necessarily about the specific knowledge as it is about the skills and the ability to learn.
Yes,
and
very
find
much
that
so.
knowledge, and also to find our own strengths and our own passions, so that we know moving forward we're going to be able to follow that path wherever it may lead, because we don't know where that
Absolutely.
path goes, but
Absolutely.
we've got the path. Okay.
Yeah. And you think about what happened during COVID, and we all saw it. There were so many people, the rug got pulled out from everybody, whether you liked it or not, right? And there were so many people who just came to a full stop because they weren't flexible in their thinking. Like they had a career that just ended or just paused, and there was not much more they could do. You know, they didn't have the flexible thinking to adapt and, you know, and be agile, right? I think the world is going to be more and more dynamic. And I think the more adaptable and agile we can make our next generation, the more successful and relevant they're going to be. So I don't think what our program does, it's not designed to put a kid through a cryptocurrency class and have them become an expert in cryptocurrency. It's about putting them through a module in cryptocurrency and to think about what the world could look like with it, where all currency is digital. As an example of one of our modules, right? So it's not about the writing code or any one of the specific niches that we talk about. It's consequential thinking, and that's something that's really missing in schools, and forget schools, just in conversations at home.
Right.
You know.
Exactly. So, Michael, people are interested now in what you're doing. How do they find you?
GiantLeapsLearning.com. And anybody who's interested or just wants to have a conversation, just email me at michael@giantleapslearning.com, and I'd love to have a conversation with you.
Wonderful. I'll put those notes put all that in the show notes. What is the one thing that you want parents to walk away with today? What is the biggest takeaway?
What I think of as have non-charged conversations with your kids. Be curious about who they are, what makes them them, and put aside all of the charge, is how I think of it. And judgment is really what charge is. Put aside all of that and ask them about what they're interested in, and really engage in that conversation, and forget what you think that means in terms of their trajectory or money making or whatever. Just get curious about them and see that doesn't change the relationship if you keep doing that.
I love that. Thank you so much, Michael. Yeah. I'm so grateful you could join us today.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Cam. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you, parents, for taking time out of your busy day to spend with us. I appreciate you as well. If you want to learn more about how to help your teens thrive, you can grab my top 10 secrets for raising teens at askdrcam.com/parentingtips. Until next time, have a peaceful, positive, calm day.
I love it.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for joining me today on Parenting Teens with Dr. Cam. Make sure to visit my website, www.askdrcam.com, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS, so you'll never miss a show again. While you're at it, if you found value in this episode, I'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, and hey, why not share it with a friend too? Be sure to tune in to my next episode. And remember, parenting teens may not be easy, but with my help, it can be a whole lot easier than this.